When we see a drawing like this with figures in it, the first thing we look at is the head. That's because we're social animals and the expression of a face gives us tons of information about what's going on in a scene. Even when we don't clearly see the face in a scene, then the head tells us what to look for. So you can imagine it's a real asset to be able to draw the head from different angles. Hey, Dr. Draw, Alex here. I've drawn more heads than I can count. And I found a simple method you can use to draw heads and faces from different angles, which I'll be sharing with you today.
Which is all about understanding anatomy. We need to understand the underlying bone structure and how the muscles work. This gives us a lot about information that we can use for the facial features and how it works in perspective. Ho.
No, we don't.
We don't?
I think we had this conversation in an earlier video. Please piss off. Although anatomy and facial features are important, they're far less important than we might think. Let me explain using an older drawing of mine. I made this about 6 years ago. It's a study of faces. All of them are kinda the same, and I'm not concerned with the head or proportions at all. You can imagine I'm especially proud about this chin. And this is a head study I did recently. Let's take away the notes. We still see the face, but we also see the head. It took me a couple of years to understand that drawing a face from different angles is a whole lot easier when you can draw the head from different angles. Which is a whole lot easier when you can rotate a box in space, like you see on the top of this page. In some angles, the face might be barely visible, but the head still adds direction to what's happening in the whole scene, which adds to the composition of the scene, just like we saw in the earlier drawing by Kim Jung-gi. While a beginning artist, like we saw in my case, starts with the face and eventually ends up with the head, a pro starts with the head and eventually ends up with the face. That's because it's a whole lot easier to work from big to small than from small to big. So how do we work from big to small and become a professional at drawing heads? Well, as an artist, we don't need to strive for realism or be anatomically correct. We just need to persuade the audience that we're drawing something that looks like a head. And that's done by simplifying. This is realism. This is a form called the Asaro head we can use to guide our drawing decisions. But we can make it even simpler by using this. Or even this. Being able to draw a face in a complex angle like this one starts with being able to draw a box in a complex angle. Being able to draw a box in different angles is the basis for drawing anything in different angles. Drawing is a lot about measuring, aligning and finding the right proportions. If you can draw a box with simple proportions as an average head and place this in different angles, you're already doing a pretty good job and you're just a few steps away from drawing a head in different angles. Or you could decide not to care about aligning stuff like the bad drawer and make portraits like this. But let's assume you want to strive for a little bit of realism. Once you've drawn a box in a certain angle, you can add 2 lines on the front side of each box, each separating approximately 1/3 of the box, and one through the center indicating the placement of the nose. The upper line indicates the placement of the eyebrows and the lower line indicates the bottom of the nose. But these lines also indicate the top and bottom of the ear, which makes the ear a great reference point to guide you in drawing the head in different angles. Although all our faces are different, on average all faces align with these proportions. So instead of looking for exceptions, let's get comfortable with following the general rules. It's easier to deviate from the rules once you know them. Now that we've added the eyebrow, the nose and the ears, we can start with the last 2 features, the eyes and the mouth. If you're like me, you probably want to draw highly detailed eyes, but honestly, that's not really necessary. You can just as well draw something like this, or even just add 2 dots. Remember that we're trying to simplify here. Whether you go for a more cartoony look or a more realistic look, the most important thing is to be aware of the proportions. So just to recap, we started by drawing a box, then measured the proportions, and finally added the facial features. By following these steps, we worked from big to small and did exactly what professional artists do. Now I know what you're thinking. This doesn't look like this at all. And you're totally right. But Kim Jung-gi, the artist who drew this, has probably done tons of exercises like we just did. Once you feel comfortable with a box, you can make the box a bit more head-like. And eventually you can play around with a more rounded form. then it might be interesting to study some anatomy. Like the skull, because the skull eventually holds everything together. When I was starting out, I would draw a couple of boxes, but I would be mainly focused at drawing a finished artwork that I could post on Instagram. And although it can be tempting to aim for a finished piece, it actually holds you back from improving, because it takes time for our brain to learn this new language and to build a visual library. We say drawing from imagination, but in reality, it's drawing from memory. If we visualize our brain as a platform, we tend to overload our working memory and aim for things we can't do yet. Overloading our brain feels very demotivating and discouraging. So instead, you could make it easy for yourself and do something simple and start with drawing a box and understand how to rotate it. The first time rotating a box takes up a lot of space on your working memory, but after a while it becomes easier. And eventually it'll take up this amount of space. The first time measuring proportions takes up a lot of space, but after a while it'll become easier and take up this amount of space. And the same for facial features. Drawing the head is like learning a language, a visual language. But once you get those fundamentals down to this size, you can combine them. Just like we see Kim Young-gi doing in this video. He starts by visualizing a simplified, still complex form and uses that to draw a realistic face. It just takes time to train our brain digesting these steps one by one. Skipping steps will only give you a brain freeze, like this dude. That's it for today. If you like this video, give it a like, comment and subscribe. If you want more in-depth tutorials, be sure to check out my Patreon, where I post monthly videos with specific drawing exercises on how to improve quickly in drawing and becoming an artist. But for now, I'd like to thank you for watching this video and stay diggity drawing. Adios! But I was moanly. Blah, 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 blah. Or we need to persuade.
Is this correct? Yes, is this correct?
Fucky. So... My God!